In 1963, I was a recent high school graduate who had begun working at Chicago's O'Hare Airport to save money for college. Like everyone else alive at that time, I was stunned at the assassination of JFK and confused about the character of the new president, Lyndon Johnson. The only thing widely known about him were stories that magazines such as Look, Collier's, Life, and Time had recently printed. The stories were generally discomforting because they seemed to produce more questions than answers about the new president. While working in the main terminal one day in the summer of 1964, Henry Wade, the Dallas district attorney, and his wife approached the counter to check in for a flight to Traverse City, Michigan. Wade's name had often appeared in news accounts coming from Dallas. They both looked bored and tired after their flight from Dallas, but immediately responded when I asked, "Are you the Henry Wade of Dallas?" Mrs. Wade was the first to respond with a smile and an excited yes. Henry also managed a little smile and nodded. There was at least a streak of shyness about him, which came as a surprise for some reason. Apparently no one else had recognized them, and neither would I have if I hadn't seen their tickets. This was before the Warren Report was published, and I resisted the urge to ask Mr. Wade any questions regarding his most important, if fleeting, case. I merely stated my hope that their work, by their meaning everyone involved in the investigation and adjudication, would soon resolve the confusion and distress that continued to afflict the country. He said thanks and left with Mrs. Wade to board the airplane. What I know now, but didn't then, is that Henry Wade was merely one man of many who were being managed by that same new president to go along with a number of odd requests from Washington, all of which were shrouded in a mysterious blanket of national security concerns related to Kennedy's assassination. The Cold War was reaching the boiling point. In fact, it had remained on high heat since the Cuban Missile Crisis, and people argued over whether Kennedy had handled it well or not. Those who felt he had not thought he had missed an opportunity to invade Cuba and send Castro packing and rid the Western Hemisphere of the Soviet Union and the menace of communism. When the verdict of the Warren Commission was announced, that the assassination was the work of a single, lone nut, the continued declaration of the national security canard, especially with respect to locking away all the remaining evidence, that which wasn't already destroyed, for 75 years, began to ring hollow. If the crime was such a simple case of a lone nut, a misguided communist, why exactly was so much of the case being treated so secretly? What were once considered facts, photographs and films, autopsy records, FBI reports, eyewitness testimony, have since been proven to have been fabricated, lost, or distorted. The enormity of the cover-up, beginning with the Warren Commission, reveals the breadth and depth of the pre- and post-assassination conspiracies that are emerging now only because of the work done by previous researchers and authors. A number of meticulously documented books have proven that the analysis presented by the President's Commission on the Assassination of John F. Kennedy, the Warren Commission, was a lie. Some will have difficulty in accepting this premise because there is a natural tendency to want to believe the government, especially a commission of supposedly learned and august men who have served it throughout their lives. For people still experiencing doubt, a careful reading of Gerald McKnight's Breach of Trust, How the Warren Commission Failed the Nation and Why, will disabuse them of any remaining questions about the validity of this point. The majority of Americans, and people around the world, already generally believe that much of the so-called investigation of events conducted by the FBI and the Warren Commission's imprimatur was flawed. The consensus on this point has only grown since 1964. They were and are absolutely correct, despite the decades of deception foisted upon them by apologists for the completely discredited official version of events. For over 40 years, it has become more and more apparent that much of the evidence originally put forward by the FBI and Warren Commission was invented or modified to fit the assertion that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman, just as other original evidence has disappeared, including JFK's brain. Furthermore, the false evidence was developed quickly, in some cases overnight, to prove that Oswald, a man his fellow Marines would say lacked coordination and call a very poor rifle marksman, shot 3 bullets, 2 of which very precisely hit their moving target in the space of a little over 6 seconds. A shooting feat, incidentally, that has never been replicated, even by expert sharpshooters.